The Mets reportedly have their offer out to Kyle Tucker, and it's a whole lot of dough. You're watching Mets Daily. I'm your host, Jake Brown, at Jake Brown Live on all social media, at Mets Daily Show on X. Smash that thumbs up on this video, hit that subscribe, hit that share button, and welcome aboard the Mets Daily channel. Friendly reminder, don't make the headlines. If you don't like them, I'm sorry, I don't make them. Fan art makes them. Right there, we're partnering with them, so don't get mad at me at the headlines. I just make the content. So, Kyle Tucker, $50 million. Listen, it's an insane amount of money, and the good thing is it's not our money. It's Steve Cohen's money. And, you know, when you get Steve Cohen as your owner, and a lot of people think the Mets have shied away from it because they have their casino and they got rid of these players. People still salty that the Mets got rid of Pete. Get over it. It's a month later. The Mets have money to spend. And signing a Kyle Tucker for a deal that what's been out there is, you know, Will Salmon said it's around 3 years, 120 to 140. Mets willing to go up. Robert Murray and both John McCone talked about $50 million AAV deal. It seems like it's 3 years, 150 is where the Mets would go. And if Kyle Tucker, with potential opt-out in there after year one or two, if Kyle Tucker's like, you know what? Why would I not take $50 million a year, have the chance to go back in the market, have an incredible year in Queens in 2026 with Lindor, with Juan Soto, me? Like, the writing's on the wall that he has the chance to have a great season with those guys in the lineup and a lot of pitches to hitting behind Juan Soto. You know, you would think if he goes out there and has success, he says, you know what, if I can't opt out, I'll opt out and go back into the market. The Blue Jays have a longer offer. The Blue Jays offer is not going to be 6 years, $300 million. The Blue Jays offer is not going to be $50 million a year. The Mets have the ability to get to that. Now, I think it limits them a little bit the rest of their offseason. Like, I think when it comes to starting pitching, then they're definitely going to be in the trade market for one of those frontline starters who doesn't cost much per year. Like, if they get Tucker, I would rule out Framber Valdez and Ranger Suarez. Like, the only way they get Tucker and a Framber or Ranger means they're trading Senga and maybe trading Peterson and shedding that $25 million between those two. But that's the only way I could see both those happening. Tucker, to me, means the Mets go to the trade market for an ace. But, you know, you can't say Stearns is being cheap. You can't say he's being stingy. He's offering Kyle Tucker $50 million a year. He's offering him Juan Soto money, and he's not the same player as Juan Soto. Defensively, he took a dive last year. His defensive numbers went down. I think he was negative -0.1 or something like that. Outs above average. He was not the same player in 2025. He did deal with injuries. He has dealt with injuries in his career, but he's also won. You know, he's won a ring. He's been to the playoffs multiple times. You know, he's had some playoff success. Kyle Tucker would be the kind of player you sign that makes a lot of Met fans stop bitching and moaning about what they lost. So it's the kind of move that a team with Steve Cohen money makes. And as much as I don't think Kyle Tucker's $50 million, as much as I think he's getting incredibly overvalued, I understand the fact that he's a really good player, and the Mets need a really good player in their lineup to hit behind Juan Soto. And he would be the guy. I mean, he is better than Pete Alonso. I don't really want to hear a debate. In his prime, better fielder, first base, easier position to find. You know, it's harder to get one of these kind of outfielders that puts up numbers like Tucker has. So you're getting an upgrade. Like, you get Kyle Tucker, you're starting to feel good about this lineup. Like, again, I would add Yandy Diaz or right-handed bat, but you start to feel really good about the Met lineup with Kyle Tucker in it. Let me know in the comments, would you give Kyle Tucker 3 years and $150 million? You know, his birthday is coming up in a couple of days. Will Salmon also says the industry expects him to sign this week. So by the end of the week, by the end of the weekend, maybe even today, guys, you know, I'm recording this at 9 a.m. Eastern. You know, your hope is Kyle Tucker's a Met. So let us know if you hope he's a Met and you think he's going to be a Met. Now, there's a report out there. It was MYM News. Listen, I take this with a grain of salt. I don't know how many sources they have there. But it is worth discussing because it is the Rockies. And the Rockies, I am sure, are very open for business. And a name that, you know, one of those under-the-radar names that Stearns might end up getting that you're like, where did this come from? So we got to talk about it. Although I don't know if it's accurate that the Mets and Rockies are talking, but it would make sense, especially if the Mets did not get Kyle Tucker. But if they did get Tucker, maybe you think, hey, well, let's add another bat in the outfield if Bench isn't ready yet. Brenton Doyle. Now, if you don't know Brenton Doyle, I understand. He's not a household name. Doyle, 3 years in his career so far, with the Rockies, 2023, 2024, 25. Brendan Doyle is 27. He'll be 28 in May. He cost essentially nothing. He would not cost, financially, the Mets, he would cost you $3 million. He is under arbitration for 3 more years after this. He is under arbitration through 2029. He's $3 million this year. When you talk about, WAR, and you talk about defense, he's pretty good. I mean, his first 2 years in the league, he won a Gold Glove. Numbers don't really jump out at you, but this is a guy that did steal 30 bases in 2024, 18 stolen bases in 2025. His WAR was 4.0 2024. His WAR was only 0.1 in 2025. So he took a deep dive in 2025, but in 2023, nothing to write home, about 10 at 48. Now, you take his numbers a bit with a grain of salt. It's the Rockies. Half his games are at Coors Field, but I don't think he'd be a bad piece, but if you don't get Tucker and you get Doyle, and you're talking about Doyle, Bench, Soto, I think Mets fans deserve the right to be pissed off. Brendan Doyle's a nice complimentary piece. He is not a main piece. So, when you get Doyle, you're going to hear a lot of fans say dumpster diving. I wouldn't go that far. The guy did win Gold Gloves in his first 2 years. So, in terms of run prevention, he fits the model. But I would not write home about Brendan Doyle. But he is young. He is his prime. He does financially cost you nothing. I can't imagine he's going to cost many prospects. Like, I would think like a Jacob Reimer and Will Watson get it done for Brendan Doyle. Maybe one other piece. And even that, some would call maybe a stretch. But worth monitoring, the Mets and Rockies. They have Mickey Moniak as well, a power hitter. Maybe he's on the move. He is an outfielder as well, corner outfielder. Wouldn't hate Mickey Moniak 24 and 68. But again, numbers a little bit inflated because he did play at Coors Field. But again, those are complementary pieces, not main pieces. We haven't talked much about the bullpen. I feel like we've thought like they're set. I think the Mets still need a reliever. I do think the Mets do need one more arm. The question is, will they go get one, and where do they go? When you look at the free agent market and what's left, Nick Martinez, Seranthony Dominguez, Chris Paddock, David Robertson will be 41, Tommy Kahnle, Brent Suter, Paul Sewald, old friend, Danny Coulomb, who I mentioned a lot over the trade deadline that I thought the Mets should go after, Andrew Chafin, Jake Junis. I could see them go after someone like a Jake Junis or a Danny Coulomb, but the reality is it's slim pickings. After that, there's not much. Hector Neris, Joey Lucchesi, former Met, Justin Wilson, who might end up retiring, Shelby Miller, Rafael Montero, old friend Jorge Lopez. It's slim pickings after that. Max Kranick, who is expected to be back in the second half of the year for the Mets. Or as they non-tendered him, but if they bring him back, he would be back in the second half. To me, I could see the Mets going after a Tommy Kahnle as well, 36, another former Yankee. Had a bit of a down year in 2025, but Tommy Kahnle is a guy who was one of the better relievers in baseball, in 2022, 2023, 2024. 2022, he's hurt, but 23 and 24, 2.66 ERA, 2.11 ERAs. He's dealt with some injuries. So you do worry about the injuries. 2020, 2021, 2022 was limited to injuries. This is a guy who has been hurt, but maybe you take a flyer on Tommy Kahnle, who's had a nice career. Kind of on the back end of it, but I think he's still got something in the tank. If the Mets wanted one more kind of depth reliever, he's a guy I look at. Jacob Junis is a guy I look at as an intriguing piece from the Guardians. Had a really good 2025 season in Cleveland, a 2.97 ERA out of the bullpen, 66 and 2/3 innings. Nice season. 2024, 2.69 ERA. The best 2 years of Junis' career came in the last 2 years. He's 33 years old. So Jacob Junis, Tommy Kahnle, names to keep an eye on. Maybe a Danny Coulomb if the Mets wanted to add another lefty. A lot of the Mets bullpen will depend on if A.J. Minter is back and good to go. So we'll see. But I do think at some point before this offseason ends, the Mets add one more reliever. All right, put us your comments below. We'll read them right now. We'll be joined by Ashley from Why I'm a Mets Fan Pod later in the week. But let me know in the comments below. Kyle Tucker, 3 years, 150. Do you like it? Do you not? Is it an overpay? Let me know. Brendan Doyle, any interest? I think if you get Tucker and Doyle, that's not like Doyle's only $3 million. So if you're telling me, all right, we're not going to trade for Yandy Diaz because we got Tucker, fine. I wouldn't hate if you're talking about Tucker, Doyle, and Soto, then you have the option if you wanted to DH a Soto some days if you're going to play bench, or DH Tucker some days if you're going to play bench. But I wouldn't hate if you got both those guys, because Doyle's elite defensively, talking about a really good defensive outfield, and better than it was. All right, your comments. KR51 says, I'm the deaf guy, lol. After today's news about Mets offer to Tucker, I would have to believe my relative Schnicker was Tucker's hitting coach in Houston and made a big impression on him. Yeah, I mean, listen, Tucker's great years were in Houston. So Schnicker and Tucker working together again, who would have thought that Troy Schnicker, Mets hitting coach, could be the way for them to get Kyle Tucker? How about that? Mark Simon says, you and I just had a comment debate last week in which I wanted Tucker and you wanted Belly. We were about to switch sides. I don't want Tucker if it's a 3-year deal with a buyout after the first year, which means I don't want him on a 1-year deal. Unless the mindset is, if we like him, we would consider offering 5 to 7 after this year is up. In that case, and only case, would be a good deal. Listen, I think the debate for him being mad about opting out after 1 year is the draft picks you'll lose, and I get that. But the Mets can't operate in that mindset, but I do understand it. It's not the best business to sign a guy, then let him opt out. But the reality is it gives the Mets a year to see what they have in their prospects. But it feels like Bellinger does not have much of a market for what he's asking for, and he should probably just take that Yankees offer. Richard Sanford says Zach is a great signing. He's durable. Yeah, I mean, it depends on what Zach Gallen's price is, but when you look at innings eaters that are available, Zach Gallen's right there towards the top next to Framber Valdez. Steven says the problem is the market of the next 3 years will not have any premier names. So if we don't overpay for Murray Tucker services, who do we get to fill these holes with in our offense the next 3 years? Who do we get out of the market when there's literally nobody? Unfortunately, we have to overpay. It's a good point, Steven. Yeah, next year's market is not good. I think there's a chance. My philosophy, I told this to my friend last night. I went to the St. John's game, Madison Club at MSG. Food is incredible. I'm still full. I could see if Tucker did sign and opt out and went elsewhere, the Mets go sign Randy Arozarena next offseason. That's one of the highlighted names. He feels like he would fit in with this Mets team. Now, he's not as exciting. I do think he's an exciting player. He's a personality. But obviously going from Tucker to Arozarena is a downgrade. But you're not wrong. Not a great free agent class, potential lockout. You're going to have to overpay for Tucker, and you might have to. Mr. Key Change says, I'm starting to think Cody Bellinger doesn't want to play in the Bronx. I think it's more just his agent. We know his agent is trying to get the best deal possible in terms of the most money in years. And, he's trying to put it out there of we want more, but teams aren't going to give more. No one's going to give Cody Bellinger 7 years. But maybe he doesn't want to go back to the Bronx. Maybe he didn't like it there. I don't know. I don't think that's the case, but I would think he would want to go back and play with Judge and try and win, but who knows? Pete Lappin says Gallen has the qualifying offer attached, which will cost a draft pick and international signing dollars. Gallen's not worth it. Fair point. Fair point. But, his innings that he eats is worth considering. Now, I think if they get Tucker, I don't think they're getting Gallen. Like I said, if they're getting Tucker, they're not going to get a $30 million or $20 million a year starting pitcher. I'd be shocked if they did, unless they find a way to defer so much money and do so much of the money in a signing bonus and figure out a workaround. Because right now they don't have, they're probably about 50 to 60 million until they're at that 350 mark. And then they still need other pieces. We'll close with this. James Finnegan said, you heard it here first. Tucker is going to sign on the 17th. Why? It's his birthday. Boom. LGM. I like it. The 17th is Saturday. So that's our deadline. By Saturday, Kyle Tucker will be a New York Met. We'll put it out there. By Saturday, his birthday, Kyle Tucker celebrates his birthday by signing 3 years for $150 with the Mets. We'll close on that. Thanks for watching Mets Daily. Subscribe, smash that thumbs up, comment, follow me at Jake Brown Live, and we'll talk to you tomorrow on Mets Daily.